Hello, dearest friends. So, you probably have seen on my stories the last few days the crazy journey that I've been going through with my dad who has Parkinson's and dementia. And so, I wanted to share this story again because whether you're a speech pathologist or not, whether you're a healthcare provider, I think this story is so important and it could possibly save come up here, Franklin. I think this story can help possibly save not just a patient, but a family member, a friend. And so, again, I just want to share this story with you all because it's the first time that I've encountered something like this in the 8-9 years of my clinical practice. Something that was very jarring to me and my family. And so my dad, like I said, he has Parkinson's and dementia. He went to the hospital initially because he was complaining of really sharp abdominal pain. My mom didn't know what it was. She thought that he was kind of just complaining about nothing that was really there. And he also ended up falling. And so my mom could not get him off the floor on top of complaining of the abdomen pain. My mom called 911. Helped my dad get up from the fall and took him to the hospital. And so it just turned out that that stomach pain was actually coming from a twisted colon that was also infected. And so my dad had surgery to remove the infected part of the colon, and he now has a colostomy bag. And so throughout all of this, he was on a ventilator. He is since off the vent, but they also placed a feeding tube through his nose, also known as an NG tube. And he had pulled it out about 4 or 5 times by the time that I had seen him over the weekend. And these types of feeding tubes are not meant to be prolonged, like you're not meant to have them for a super long time. And my dad had already had it with this feeding tube up his nose. And so when I went to visit him over the weekend, my goal was to get him to start eating. I wanted that feeding tube out of his nose, and I did not want them to put another feeding tube in his stomach. Due to his age, his diagnoses, and the surgery that it's gonna require, I really did not want a feeding tube, and my family agreed. And so, of course, the first thing that I do, I write down my name, my information, that I'm a speech pathologist, and I want the speech pathologist to call me as soon as she has assessed my dad, and I really want them to perform a modified barium swallow study so we can actually see what's going on. I had not heard anything from the speech therapist. Thankfully, the next day, my dad had a care team. Oh, I forgot. Before this, I performed my own swallow evaluation at bedside of my dad, and he did really well. Everything was intact. Oral motor exam revealed everything, looked normal, and so I thought, hey, all signs point to yes here. Like, let's get this man eating, right? Okay, now we fast forward to the next day. The doctor came for a little care plan meeting, and so the doctor told my mom and I that my father was, so I asked when they could remove the feeding tube and when he can start eating. And so the doctor said that my father is terminal, and because he had already failed his speech therapy the past 3 times, if we wanted him to eat by mouth and not by a feeding tube to his nose or a feeding tube in his stomach, we would have to sign a DNR, DNI. And so, which is do not resuscitate, do not intubate. And we were shocked. And I think the doctor saw that on their face. And I asked if they could explain this terminal diagnosis to me, because in my mind, Parkinson's is progressive, dementia, progressive, but terminal, my dad is not on his deathbed. So did not agree with this terminal word. And so I asked, why do we need to sign a DNR, DNI? And so she, had us pull out our healthcare proxy, all of the papers, his living will. And so we said, if my dad was, God forbid, in like a persistent vegetative state, if he was comatose, if the only way he was alive was through tubes, in his body. If he was not like completely nonverbal, no, he would not want to live, and the DNR, DNI would be appropriate. But if my dad is the way he was presenting today and was eating by mouth and started choking, yes, we want CPR, we want chest compressions, we want you to save his life. And so the doctor said, well, we couldn't pick that option. He either had to be DNR, DNI or not. And I said, we cannot make this decision because you guys have not formally assessed his swallow. And so I was really, really pushing for the speech pathologist to come while I was there so we could do our evaluation together and I could express my family's wishes and goals and show her that my dad actually can swallow and was doing fairly well. So the speech therapist finally came. The doctor said she was going to put in an order. The physician assistant came in, checked the order. The nurse, like, guys, I was on it. I wanted every person to know that I was a speech pathologist and that I needed that speech pathologist to come today. So thankfully the speech pathologist came. She did a bedside examination and agreed that my father was safe to begin eating, and asked if we wanted to proceed with an instrumental. And so here's the problem. I don't know if that speech therapist was aware that the DNR, DNI decision was riding on the fact that he had failed his past 3 speech attempts. No one had pushed for a repeat swallow study, only myself. And so if no one was there asking for him to get another swallow study, if no one was asking for another speech evaluation, if my mom was by herself, she would have been forced to sign this DNR, DNI for my father, who all he wanted to do was eat. And no one had actually formally assessed a swallow to know if he was safe or not. So how can we make these life or death decisions? How can we deem someone DNR, DNI based on their swallowing abilities when we have not even assessed their swallowing abilities? Riddle me that, please. So thankfully, he was able to get a swallow study. My mom went with him the next morning and he was cleared for mechanical soft and nectar. So if you want like the nitty gritty details of his swallow study and everything in between, you can check the story saved on my highlights. That's called Road to PO, where I've documented everything. But again, I just want to share this story because it is so important that we're doing a thorough chart review, that we're checking the patient's goals, that we're talking with the family and checking the family's goals. Does the patient have a feeding tube? Do they not want a feeding tube? There were so many questions that no one had really asked my mom nor myself to really get a comprehensive picture of my father. So today he is eating. He is asking for a medium burger with fried onions and pickles and a milkshake. He is asking for ice cream and cake. And so he's doing so much better. I am hopeful that he'll be on thin liquid shortly. But again, I just stress the importance, whether you have a family member who has Parkinson's or dementia or a progressive disease, whether you are a healthcare provider or a speech pathologist, we really need to know our patients through and through. We need to know their goals. We need to know what's riding, what is riding on your care plan if you are a healthcare provider, right? And so thank you for listening. Thank you for all of the support, all of the DMs that you guys have been sending me. It's so appreciative. And so I hope this story helps one of you out there today. And if you have any questions, like I have said before, I'm an open book about this, so please do not hesitate to comment, to send me a DM. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, no matter where you are watching from in the world.